Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Launchpad's Pick and Mix podcast. And with us today, we have got the young David, I'm going to call him, who is, and I hope you don't mind me calling him a friend, one of my oldest edu friends, I think.
No. Yeah, we joined Twitter back in the day about the same time.
Way back.
What was it? Well, 2010, something like that?
2010, it was the era of the Teach Meet. You were at
The
Cleveland,
Teach
weren't you?
Meets. Yeah. At Clevedon School.
That's it.
Yeah.
Mark Anderson.
Mark Anderson. Mr. ICT or something.
He had a glossy jacket. didn't he, to wear?
Yeah. ICT
Evangelist.
Yeah.
So welcome to David. David, for all the audience members, for once and for all, how do you pronounce your last name?
Didau.
Didau.
It rhymes with cry and cow. That's how I remember.
Cow. Okay, that's how you've remembered it since you were a child.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, not since. So do you know? So I wasn't born with this name.
Oh, come on.
No, absolutely. I changed my name to Didau when I was 18 by statutory declaration, which is if you ever want to change your name, don't do deed poll. That's like the silly way. It's expensive and. Statutory declaration, you just literally go in front of a magistrate and say, I declare that this is now my name, and it's it was then free. And so I did that. And people sometimes, as you may be considering asking, like, why?
Oh, no, don't. Yeah, I don't want to derail the podcast, but also this is probably the most engaging start to any episode I've ever had.
Right. Well, yeah. So it came to me in a dream.
Shut up.
It did. It came to me. I woke up and I'm going to be David Didau, and it was only later that somebody pointed out that David and Didau are pretty much anagrams, especially when you think about sort of Latin scripts where there are no U's. It's all these. What
a start! Wow.
I'm basically David or Didau. In fact, I accidentally put my name on my mobile phone account as Didau, and they won't let me change it. So when I phone up to do anything, I have to say, hello, it's Didau.
That's so funny. Well, if you're not familiar with David, he is an English teacher by trade, but he is much more than that. He's done so much consultancy and impacted on the system so widely, not just through his physical consultancy, but he, from an English background, is a prolific writer, and we'll talk about some of the books a bit later. And I'm absolutely overjoyed he's come here today. And we're going to learn a little bit more about him. And as normal on the podcast, we'll unpick some of the leadership launchpads that have resonated most with him. So let's get cracking with your first kind of fast friends question.
Okay.
And it was
Tell me, what's the fast friends concept, Chris?
Yeah, so the fast friends concept, it basically, some researchers were doing research, obviously, into group dynamics and how quickly can you create connection between people. And they created this set of what eventually was 36 questions that grow in their kind of vulnerability. And they found that if you get people to share their answers increasingly down this list.
So are you going to tell me yours?
I could do, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can definitely do the one where you talk about crying, because I do a lot of crying.
All right.
Let's go with that. But the first one you chose was about what new ability, if you could have any ability.
Oh, yeah, right. I mean, it's an obvious one. My superpower, if I could choose one, would be to freeze time.
Okay. To freeze it, not rewind it.
Oh, well, I think that way lies kind of chaos, and I think if you could rewind time, it would be very hard to live.
Okay.
Yeah. So to be able to, everything stops. Hang on, let's get my stuff together.
Okay.
In, back, that kind of thing.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, and that links to some of the stuff we're going to talk about later. I would imagine most leaders would appreciate in how frenetic educational leadership or just general leadership is, the ability to take a pause.
Well, there's a lot of pressure on people to sort of make decisions quickly, and that doesn't necessarily correlate with good decision making.
It's probably opposite, like you say. Yeah. Well, that's fascinating. Is there a length of time? What would be your optimal pause time, do you think?
Well, look, I mean, it depends, doesn't it? So I think I don't want to be tied down to a pause time. I want to be able to be, maybe I need to go and read something.
Okay.
And that could take a few hours, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe
I like having like a remote control.
Maybe I need to nip to the loo.
Okay.
Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah. All right. Well, that's interesting.
That would be a superpower, wouldn't it? To never apparently need the loo because you're.
I find that I've done a launchpad on this somewhere about this idea between the space between stimulus and response.
Oh yeah.
And how for lots of us, and I seem to be better at work than I am at home, that the time between stimulus and response for me is quite short. And when I don't put enough space between those, I make bad responses, like shouting at my kids or something.
Oh, you don't do that, do you?
Well, only get my PE voice, get my outdoor voice. I'm not out of control.
Do you have a whistle?
I could do, couldn't I? That would be. Put your shoes on.
Yeah.
So that would be interesting. I'd like that idea.
How old are your kids, Chris?
14 and 11. Yeah, SATs this week.
Okay.
So I think I'm with you on the pausing time.
Something I don't. Yeah, I just froze there. Sorry about that. Mine are a bit older. So mine are 21 and 19, and the eldest is currently training to be a primary school teacher.
Oh,
I know.
Nice. Would you have gone primary if you could have?
No.
Interesting. All right.
My hat is off to primary teachers. I have nothing but respect for them.
Me too.
But no, it wasn't my bag. In fact, now I think more latterly, I do enjoy teaching primary classes, and I've had the opportunity to do that over the last few years. But I think my younger self did not fancy that.
Well, let's jump straight into your kind of ignition point, which we talked about this idea that most of us have events in our lives that maybe we don't realize it, but they transform us in some way. Yeah. And really, the nudge of this podcast, as it's different from other leadership podcasts, is to get behind the lives of some of these leaders that we all kind of, hold up in high esteem, to find out a bit more about what happened to them to get them to these kind of lofty places. So the first one you chose was the kindness of strangers. Tell us about that.
So I just put that as a place. So I mean, okay, this is deeply revealing of my shady past. But I was living homeless in Amsterdam,
right?
And and had reached a pretty low ebb, and I met this German lad who paid my fare home.
Right. Wow.
Which I kind of, I mean, it might not be too, melodramatic to say, but I kind of credit him with, if not saving my life, at least making it a lot better, a lot more quickly than it would otherwise have been.
Wow. And have you had any contact with him since?
No, I don't know. I can't remember his name. I just out of nowhere, he just said, "I'll pay your ferry fare to get home. You need to go. You need to get out of here."
Yeah.
And I did. I didn't spend it on anything else, which was
in that place. Well, that is, again, I think I'm going to use the word fascinating a lot today. That is fascinating. And I'm reading this, or listening, as the standard thing, listening to a book at the moment called Ego is the Enemy.
Right.
Ryan Holiday or Holiday? I think it's Halliday, Ryan Halliday. Anyway, I think there's a link there because he talks a lot about how we do things for an external reward. Like we're, even if we went and volunteered at a hospital, we would then splash it all over Facebook to say, "I've been volunteering at a hospital."
Well, we might, but even the satisfaction is an external reward, isn't it?
Yeah, I was just thinking about your guy.
Oh
He's
yeah,
done that
yeah.
without any.
No idea. No,
No,
I mean, he obviously got something out of it, didn't he?
must have. I
Uh,
just.
I promise you, there was nothing
Well,
sinister.
no, of course. And I understand that, if there's a link to leadership about, not making our relationships too
Well,
transactional.
yeah, I think there's something around that, but I also think there's something, that around this maybe sounds a bit religious, but around the concept of grace,
Mm,
that sometimes we're given things that we don't deserve.
right.
We haven't done anything to deserve them, and we should be really grateful.
Yeah.
But also, we should pass that on. I
Oh,
think.
I love that. Yeah.
I think that's really
That's
important. So sometimes, just find it. I reflect on the fact that sometimes I've been very fortunate in lots of areas, and I don't need to sort of fanfare it. But
no.
if I can be in a position
Pass it on.
to give someone a step up or a some kind of thing that will
Yeah.
help them,
And there's some.
ideally without them knowing. But that's
Well, yeah, that's even better, isn't it? I was going to say because there is. It makes you feel good to pass it on as well.
it does, yeah, of course,
It's a
and that's the
win-win, isn't
external
it?
reward that you're talking about.
Yeah,
It's all selfish.
that's really interesting. Yeah, I wonder. I think I might have said this in a previous episode, but it's coming back to me now about this idea that I should and we all should reflect on, who we could pass it on to, like
Yeah,
tomorrow. And I like
yeah.
your idea of doing it
We're
without
in.
their knowledge.
We're in. Well, I think it was. I think years ago, I remember Eleanor Roosevelt. I think
Okay.
saying that we should try every day to do something for someone else without telling them about it.
Yeah.
And I don't obviously live up to that on a daily
No.
basis, but I do. Like there is a tendency to sort of go, "Oh, do you know what I've done for you?" And
Yeah.
sort of want that gratitude.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
try to resist that.
Yeah, it's hard to resist, isn't it?
It
But
is.
I don't think we should.
But it's the effort that I think counts.
Well, you're right.
You're
Yeah.
right to say transactional, Chris, because I think our culture is so transactional. We buy things, we pay for things,
Yeah.
we deserve things, we expect things, and that I've had in the as over my career. I think the experiences which have shown me that that not necessarily better ways but different ways. So one of the things, one of the experiences that I most value was spending a couple of weeks teaching in Uganda in
Oh,
some
really?
schools in Kampala, and
Wow.
people, I mean, without sort of being dramatic, there's
Yeah.
very different expectations and there's very different sense of you know the idea of like what school offers and why it's
Yeah.
important, and being able to do that, and it. I mean, I'm going off topic here. One of the
No,
things
keep
I
going. Yeah. Good.
remember, I was doing a session with a group of educators whose job it was to support rural schools, which are quite hard to get to, and they were saying things like, it's not uncommon in sub-Saharan Africa to have classes of 60 to 80
Oh,
kids,
is
that
it?
kind of thing.
Wow.
And they were saying, one of the things they were saying is like, we often get people from like the West telling
Yeah.
us to do, personalized learning
Right.
and inquiry and group work
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
sort of
Yeah.
thing. How would you recommend that we did it with? So I said, I don't do it. That's bonkers. You
Yeah.
can't, you can't. But and so some of the whole class interactive teaching that I've seen teachers do in those settings, I think
Yeah.
it's, that somebody like me goes into those spaces, and I think there's a real kind of fear for teachers that they're going to be judged by
Of course.
the Westerner, and
Yeah.
I just go in and go, you what you're doing is incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
you're doing this every day. It's astonishing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And
And
yeah, and like, again, that speaks to if it meets the needs of the kids, then
well,
it's right.
yeah. I mean, would it be better if they were smaller classes? No doubt.
Of course.
No doubt. But you deal the hand that you dealt. You play the hand you dealt. Sorry, don't.
Well, let's get into your first launchpad, because this is one of my favourite ones, but it's also one of the most uncomfortable ones, because I think when I made it, I was kind of describing myself, which is again slightly awkward. So this is this concept of, let me just get this slide up so people that are watching can benefit from that.
Oh, the slides, Chris.
Well, I just thought that I'd put the launchpad up so people can kind of. So this is this idea of poor proxies for leadership, and so I'll just explain a little bit what I was thinking when I wrote it, and then you can tell me about why it resonated with you. And of course, if anyone's not familiar with the work of Professor Rob Coe, he wrote this initial thing about poor proxies for learning, and then David actually did a really nice post off the back of that. If you want to start Googling it about, okay, but what would be a good proxy? And we won't get into that, but it got me thinking about, potentially when we describe excellent leadership or when we design leadership courses, and, we might be either celebrating or promoting the wrong observable behaviors. And so if you haven't thought about this before, have a think about this. So these are not important, but they are potentially the wrong things to measure the success of a leader by. And as I said before, they potentially describe me. So the first one, which comes up a lot, isn't it, is visibility. People want their leaders to be visible, which is understandable. Yeah. But, there's this idea that, a great leader is always around. They're the face of the projects. They have all the activities and the communications. And of course, we'll go through the list and then we'll talk about why these are probably not as accurate as they could be. The next one is knowledge. We tend to celebrate and kind of, think well of people who've got a lot of knowledge. And they might have loads of qualifications, they might have doctorates and PhD, all kinds of things like that. We then think about busyness. It's a badge of honor, sadly, that we're busy. I'm sorry, I'm so busy. My diary's full. I don't have time. I've got so much on. And, they work at a really high pace. They work till bonkers late at night. They get up early in the morning. They work weekends. And, they must be a great leader. Then you get the one which I'm, very guilty of, because I hide my lack of confidence just with PE-related bluster. And so,
and slides.
And slides. You can never love a good slide, style over substance. But they communicate, these leaders who are ultra confident, they communicate in the act with lots of assurance, and that makes people think, oh, what a great leader. They're always doing new stuff. They are visionary, they've got a really clear view of the future, tons and tons of ideas, loads of change, And then the last one, which I think it took me a while to get to this one, and I left it for a while until one day, hilariously, it was in winter, which is why it's relevant. I was in a school that I hadn't been in before, one of our trust schools, and I had one of those long, woolen trench coats that you see a lot of SLT members.
Oh yeah. I have one of those.
I've got my, and a kid said to me, "Are you our new head teacher?" And I said, "No." And I said, "No." I said, "Why did you say that?" "You got one of those coats, one of those SLT coats."
Yeah.
And that's what I laughed to myself. And I thought, I wonder if appearance is also something that people go, "Oh, wow, he could be a good leader."
Dress for the job you want, not the job you've got.
You've got it. That's my new launch pad. Do I have to credit you for that one?
No, God, my mum told me that.
Did she?
Yeah, she did.
Well, when you saw this in the book, why does this resonate with you then?
Well, okay, so I think some of those are better proxies than others. So I think visibility and knowledge are not bad proxies. I don't think they are poor, and we can talk about why. I think they're not the same thing, but I think they are necessary to effective leadership. And the others, I think, are more problematic. So busyness. I don't even think it's in some ways it's not something I would look at someone. I would never look at someone who is visibly busy and think, oh, that means they're an effective leader. I always think busyness is a sign of not being on it.
Not organised.
Not having time for people is not a great look.
No.
Not having time to do what's required. I think, so trying to avoid busyness. If you're running a school, if you're a head teacher, it's easy for me to say because there are incredible demands on your time. But I think some of the head teachers, school leaders that I've most enjoyed working with over the years are the ones that give their time, and don't do it resentfully. So confidence is I've written and thought a lot about confidence over the years, and the thing is, we really like people who are confident. We feel comforted by their confidence. We want people to make bold, decisive choices, and I think if you look at interviews with politicians. And sometimes we get irritated with the fact that they're being asked a question by an interviewer and they're not being nailed down, and they're reeling off their confident certainties. And actually, the issue is that I think we prefer people to be certain and confident than to be right.
Yeah.
That we don't really mind so much if they're wrong. We just want them to have that appearance of decisiveness and confidence.
That feels dangerous.
It is dangerous. So I think the trap there is that there's a huge pressure on anyone in a position of leadership to give the public what they want, to give people, that nobody wants a ditherer going, no, so we don't want that. But I do think that there needs to be a narrative where, and I'm always impressed actually when I meet school leaders who go, I don't know, I'm going to have a think.
I love it.
I always respect that because there is some vulnerability in that, but the opposite is often bluff and bluster but worse, I think, than the bluff and the bluster is where people already know. They're like, yep, this is what we need to do. And there's
we should probably be wary of that, shouldn't we?
I think we should be wary of it. I think we're, that very often people in that mindset are about to make a mistake. But, that certainty, that confidence, it closes down curiosity.
Yes.
It closes down openness. And so sometimes when I do training, one of the things that I do is I show, have you ever seen the Necker cube, Chris?
No.
Oh, it's not very clever. It's just like a 3D, one of those 3D representations of a cube where you can see all the internal work. And I show them that. And obviously everyone looks at it and goes, I've seen like a zillion of those, whatever. And I say, look at it, stare at it intently for about 5 seconds and see if you notice anything happen. And what happens is if you really look at it, the back wall pops and becomes the front.
How do you spell this?
Oh, it's called the Necker cube. It's named after a mathematician, Necker. But it's just a cube. It's just like and so any cube will do it. It doesn't have to be the Necker cube. But so you show it to people and they love it because it's like, wow, it just changed. And then you carry on looking and it changes back. And the point that I make is that if you look at anything with a sense of certainty, I know what this is. You'll see what you expect.
Interesting.
But if you look with a sense of openness, sometimes you see something that you didn't expect. And that's confidence can close that down. So it's not that there can be it's not all bad being confident. No. But it comes with risks.
Yeah.
What I'd say.
Well, and I was thinking when I did that, I think a lot of those are on continuums, aren't they? It's not good to be not visible. It's not good to be just wandering around your school all day.
No, I mean wandering aimlessly around your school is not great. But I do think visibility is really important. I do, when I talk to staff in schools about sort of how they feel, the sense that their leadership teams are out and about and have their backs and are dealing with stuff is really important.
Super, super important.
I remember Stuart Locke saying to me that I don't know if he still does this, but he had a script that for his leadership teams, when they'd go into a classroom, they'd say, "Is everything to your satisfaction?"
Oh,
To his
nice.
teacher. I liked it.
Yeah, it's almost
So
like a
he was,
service.
yeah, in a kind of non-judgmental way, but we want it to be perfect.
Yeah.
So you need to tell us if there's anything we can do to make it a bit better.
Like it.
And I really like that as a kind of as a script, as a default interaction that you might have. So I use that a lot, when I'm in that position of, dropping into lessons and sort of being a bit annoying potentially.
Yeah.
Being able to say, like, what can I do? How can I help?
Love it. And that's a great way for leaders to think. One of the things I try to get people who are listening, I suppose, is to have a couple of call to actions or a couple of things that they could take away and think more about. And I suppose that would be an interesting one. Think about as a leader, what's the first thing you say when you go in to watch a lesson?
Yeah.
It's
a privilege, Chris.
It is a privilege. And I always think if I asked the person in the classroom, the teacher, why is David here? Their response would be fascinating, wouldn't it? He's here to help me, or he's here to check if I'm doing my job.
Yeah.
These are two
and obviously,
different,
it's on us to build trust.
It is. Yeah. Well, let's keep cracking on because I'm fascinated about this next.
Can I give you a good proxy?
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you've got one, but
no, I've yet to kind of discover one.
Oh, really? Well, okay. Try this on. See what you think. Trustworthiness.
Yeah, like it.
So I think for me, trustworthiness is made up of two things. So one of which is honesty.
Yeah.
Which is, and that's more than just not lying, which obviously don't do that. But it's also doing what you've committed to, to. And I think that's very easy for busy school leaders to overcommit.
I think you're right. Yeah,
and it erodes trust. Really, and I think it's fine to say to staff, "I'm really sorry, I got that wrong," but you can't carry on saying it.
No,
you've got to hold yourself accountable.
Yeah.
So that honesty, you can trust me to do the thing that I've said I will do, is really, really important. And I think the other side of trustworthiness is being sufficiently expert.
Right.
So if you're not sufficiently expert, why would anyone trust your opinion?
Yes.
So you've got to. So that your knowledge there, just being knowledgeable about, but I think you have to be sufficiently knowledgeable about all the areas that you are responsible for leading on. So
is that something then about like trust in the leader's knowledge and trust in the leader's actions?
So trust. So I think trust is a hugely important stock in a school, which can very easily get depleted.
Yeah.
And it runs both ways, that I think we all like and benefit from feeling that we're trusted.
Yeah.
But if you want to create a culture of trust in your school, then it starts with the people at the top of the hierarchy. You've got to extend out. And I think that it can be hard for leaders sometimes to think, well, what are the risks? If I trust people and they let me down, what's it be like, if they don't do their jobs, and there are people in the system who for various reasons, are not always trustworthy.
Yeah.
But I think it's worth the risk to extend trust. Do you know Pascal's wager?
No. Oh, man,
so
dropping some big
French
words.
mathematician called Blaise Pascal had this thing, proposition, and it was an argument for why you should believe in God.
Okay.
And he said that, so if you he looked at the consequences of the action. So if I believe in God, then I'll go to church and I'll pray and I'll do all the things. And if I'm wrong, I've just wasted some Sundays.
Yeah.
But if on the other hand, I decide not to believe in God and not to do the stuff, if I'm wrong, I spend eternity in hell. So on balance,
I like it.
Yeah. So I think there are risks, for me, maybe we call it Didau's wager.
Okay. I'm going to write it down.
But there are risks. So the people may let you down.
Yeah.
But the consequences of distrust are immediate and toxic.
Love it.
And not worth it.
Well,
they are that eternity in hell.
Yeah.
So
Well, there's a something for people to take about. I love that. So the next fast friends question you chose
Right.
was, what do you value in friendship?
Yeah. Okay. So I guess what I value most in friendship are people who are willing to tolerate slackness on my part.
Okay.
So my best friends are people that
Tolerance.
I often don't interact with, sometimes for
Right.
years,
Yeah.
and it doesn't matter.
No.
That we just pick up where we left off. I'm not very good at being in contact.
Okay.
I'm not very good at having the bandwidth to sort of keep lots of people sort of like my wife's amazing. She has like over the course of a week, she speaks to like seemingly a huge list of people,
Yeah.
maintains
Yeah.
healthy relationships with them all,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's probably a bloke thing, isn't
I
it?
think I can see myself a lot in that as well. Yeah.
So, so I really value people for whom that's not required.
Yeah. That's nice, isn't it? Yeah. So it's almost a kind of, it's not transactional,
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
or it can survive without regular
Yeah.
transaction.
Yeah, there are various people that over the course of your life that you get on with and you share interests with, but it's a relationship of convenience. And when they
Yeah.
move on, that the relationship doesn't continue because they're out
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
sight,
Yeah.
out of mind. And they were it was great while it lasted, but
Yeah.
I'm not, we all know it's not going to be maintained.
I feel like we might be describing our relationship.
Ah, Chris, don't.
But
Yeah,
hey, we'll come back together.
exactly. There
I'll
we are.
see you in 5 years.
See,
Um, I love it.
no
All right, well,
resentment. That's
let's get into what should we do next? Let's do your second ignition point. So this is a mutual
a man you
ignition
know
point.
well.
A man I know well, and I'm going to be careful not to talk about my experiences because this is all about you today. But tell us a bit. What I'm interested in is, what was life like before you met this person? Who is the person, and how did it transform you?
Okay, so I was working at a school in Weston-super-Mare, which is now it used to be called Wyvern Community School. It's now Hans Price, which obviously very
I
well.
think very well, yeah.
Part of the CLF,
Yeah.
and so I was there I think I was the second in English, and I think the I think there was I can't remember it was a long time ago, but there was some sort of it was in the years building up to it being taken over by Cabot, when Sir David Carter
Here he is.
was still the CEO or was the CEO. And the founding CEO, wasn't he?
He was, yeah.
Yeah, and we were told, oh, David Carter's going to come and do like a course, for anyone who's interested in developing their leadership,
Okay.
who wants to sign up? And I was like, I'll do it. I fancy that. So I
Yeah.
sort of pitched up, and I remember. I don't remember. I remember almost nothing of the course. But I do remember he said, how many of you are on Twitter?
Right.
And, no one knew what he was talking about.
No.
And so and he was like, well, you should
Right.
get on Twitter. And I was like, do you know what, David? I will.
I'm going to do it.
And so he is responsible
Wow.
for the entirety of my social media life.
Yeah.
So if you've got an axe to grind, take it up.
Take it up with if there's ever been a tweet that you disagreed with.
Yeah, it's his
go
fault.
back to Sir David. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's fascinating. And is there's something then about what did that do for you then, being on Twitter?
Oh, do you know, I found a voice. I think I was I think as many teachers feel, that we're in our bubble and we can't affect very much.
Yeah.
And it's very easy for classroom teachers to feel kind of a bit helpless and a bit constrained.
Yeah.
And I went on to Twitter. I started writing a blog and found I was really lucky because it was the early days and there wasn't that much competition. I found, a voice, and I found an audience, and I found that people, challenged me to, with things that I'd never thought before, and I learned just an incredible amount over a really fast, really short period of time, and it absolutely galvanized
Nice.
who I am and who I became, and how I see myself,
Yeah.
and just it's so important for people to feel that they've got agency
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
control,
Yeah.
and I didn't, and post that I did.
And I mean, we could spend all day talking about this, but one thing I'm interested in, because when I speak to people about
And that's
this
how we
stuff,
met, isn't it?
it is how we met, yeah, and exactly. So we got that to thank. And one of the things that I think you were quicker into, potentially because of your English background, and I sort of was around the fringes of lacking confidence about writing because of a sort of a fear of failure and stuff. I hear that still. People say, "Oh, I'm on social media, but I only lurk in the background.
I'm a lurker." Yeah.
I'm a lurker. But what would your advice be for people to get over that?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's kind of easy for me to say, just get over it. But,
Yeah, right.
every now and again, when I'm visiting a school, somebody will come up to me and say, "How do I get to do what you're doing?" And it's
Right.
like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
No
what
roadmap.
are you doing currently? I mean, how are you connecting with people? How are you sharing your thoughts and ideas? How are you developing your knowledge? And they'll, very often they're not doing anything. They're just fancy.
Yeah.
It's like that, "Oh, I want to be a celebrity," kind of,
Right. Yeah.
and I guess there are people who are famous for being famous, but I was never driven by that. I just felt full of things that I wanted to get out there and put out there, and and if you look back, I think I've left all the comments and all the stories up there, but some of the in the first few years of blogging, I wrote some quite sort of, eccentric stuff.
Yeah.
And Andrew Old,
I
who
remember.
some
Yeah.
listeners will be
You're
aware
still
of.
around, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, still around. Used to get in touch with me and point out why I was wrong.
Yeah.
And, and I'd never encountered somebody with his opinions before.
No.
And it really floored me at first. And he's relentless.
He is.
He is relentless to a fault sometimes. But I feel that, I don't know, I feel that he sort of decided it was worth the effort to try and persuade me.
Yes.
And I feel like I responded quite well. So I had a friend who isn't on social media anymore, a guy called James Theobald. You probably know James.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
We used to sort of message and go, "Oh, this is what I'm doing in my class." He's an English teacher as well. "This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm thinking. What would Andrew say?"
Yeah. Right.
And
Well,
so there's all of these blog comments
yeah.
there with, me saying, "But what about?" and him going,
Yeah. Nope.
patiently.
But it's fascinating you said it, because I remember when I was asking for advice, and someone said to me, they said, "You don't think anyone's reading it, do you, Chris?" And there's a bit of that, like,
Wow, yeah.
don't get ahead of yourself. You writing one blog post, you might have a couple of people that are reading it, and they're probably reading it. They're probably nice people. They've gone out of their way to find it and read it.
Probably your mum.
Yeah, your mum. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just get out there and do it would be my advice.
Yeah, no, I think so. So I'd been trying to write for years. And I used to have a blog where I talked about films I'd been to see and books I'd read. No bugger read it.
No.
And it's dispiriting. It's kind of hard. Continuing in the face of indifference.
It is,
and so for me, it was I'd always wanted to write, to be a writer.
Yeah.
And to find that I could write about education was such a joy for me. It really was.
I wonder what the link
listened. People were interested.
Yeah, I think the link to leadership potentially is making sure you see people and give them a voice in your organizations, and give some sort of recognition or validity to their efforts, potentially. I'm just thinking, this literally happened this morning. My son, who's 11, started a YouTube channel, where he wanted to record FIFA games, football games, and put them on there. We found a clever tweak in that we'd put the games of the upcoming week on a kind of roulette wheel, select a random game. He'd play the game as a premonition of the upcoming score, and we put it on Twitter to see if we would put it on YouTube. So, Arsenal are going to beat Man United 3-1, apparently, because that's what happened in my game. He got about 2 views, right? And he got completely dispirited, and we haven't done anything for a month. And then 2 days ago, he said, I want to make a YouTube short. And I'm like, okay, what's that? Turns out it's a short YouTube video.
Who knew?
Who would have guessed? Anyway, yesterday, we trimmed some of his bigger clips and we put them on there. Fine. He was a little bit more interested. This morning, I said, let's do one more. We went on, and yesterday, one of his videos had 110,000 views.
Good grief.
So he's coming back from school today, I would imagine, like a Superman.
Wow.
And that might be, who knows, but that might be the thing that then renews it.
Wow,
anyway, let's keep moving, because
none of my YouTube videos have ever had.
That's what I said to him. No bugger's going to watch this part of this podcast. Let's get into your second launchpad, because I think this, again, I was chuffed when you selected this one. So let's just move on to from proxies. This one, apologies for the animation there. That'll bug me, but it's too late now. This idea of the erosion of efficacy, which for me is a bit of the word, I think it gets misconstrued. Of course, my doctorate's in self-efficacy, and people instantly, when they see efficacy, have now joined the two together. And this idea that, efficacy means, I don't know, effectiveness, or, and it could be not just self-efficacy, but the efficacy of something.
Yeah.
And so I was playing around with this idea that probably things aren't as effective as they could be for maybe some sort of, things to do with their context. So I was playing around with this idea that, sadly, time seems to damage the effectiveness of lots of stuff, either not giving projects or techniques or whatever enough time, or sort of taking that time away or robbing. And it links to what we said earlier, about people having to make very quick decisions, or doing shallower thinking because of a lack of time. I then started thinking, okay, well, the expertise, a lack of expertise probably ruins it. And either selecting the wrong people for the projects, or kind of not developing people enough to be able to be successful in the thing that you've given them, is a kind of probably a problem. I struggle with, I've struggled with this personally, this ability to focus. I've got 35 schools that I look after, and my default is to serve them all. But the reality is then that dilutes my focus, And of course, in schools, they're so dynamic and so kind of interconnected that I was thinking about this idea that maybe as leaders, we don't create the conditions that allow enough focus for people to be kind of useful.
Yeah.
And then, of course, and again, I feel like all these launch pads, they just, are negatively slanted on my leadership.
Yeah.
But a lot of us are obsessed, aren't we, with the sexiness of new stuff and the initial periods of projects and that kind of launch section of the implementation cycle. And often we neglect the monitoring elements.
Yeah.
I mean, what are your thinkings about this one?
So I'm currently fascinated by cybernetics, which sounds, I know, sounds really science fiction, doesn't it? It literally means, it comes from the Greek for steersman. So it's about the art of steering.
Okay.
And so so cybernetics or systems management or systems thinking, as they're all terms that are used interchangeably, I think is something where there is stuff out there about how this can apply to schools, but it's not really very mainstream.
Right.
And so I think that the biggest reason why things don't work the way we kind of hope they will is because the systems are not aligned to what we want them to do. And there's a great little axiom which listeners might have heard before, which is the purpose of a system is what it does. POSIWID, which Stafford Beer came up with in, I think, 2002. And it's, I think I find that really, really useful to sort of, it's almost like a reductio ad absurdum thing. So, that I was getting a train the other day and it was so much effort and it was so expensive and it was so delayed that I was thinking, God, the purpose of the rail network is to disincentivize people from taking trains. Because that's what the result was. And I think that, if you, with that lens, if you look at some of what goes on in schools and think, wherever you see staff or students doing something a bit odd or a bit unexpected, if you start thinking about, like, how is the system incentivizing that?
Yeah.
What's if we assume that people are in the main well-intentioned, especially people who work in education, are well-intentioned and are trying to do a good job, like, what stops them? Like, why are we having to go around? Why are we having to go around and remind teachers about sort of taking the register in the first 5 minutes of their lesson? Well, probably because there's a ton of things they have to do in the first 5 minutes of the lesson, and they're making a judgment about which of those is the most pressing, and the most pressing is always going to be to deal with the human beings in front of you.
Yeah.
And so it's, if your system doesn't make it easy to get people to do the thing that you want them to do, then they're going to struggle to do it.
Oh, I love that.
And so sort of thinking about that there are feedback loops that are in operation which can sort of accelerate and keep things going, but also lead to things sort of veering off piste and sort of going unexpected places. And so thinking about how these feedback loops work. And so some of those things respond to our own neglect. So if as leaders we say things like, right, everyone has to walk on the left of the corridor, and then we don't, we put signs up.
Yeah.
But we don't actually follow through.
Yeah.
Why would anyone, it's inconvenient. Why would they follow our one-way system?
Yeah.
So the purpose, we've said everyone's supposed to do this, but what our system's actually incentivizing is do whatever you like.
Yeah.
Because that's what's at play. So I think, I find it a very, very useful way of thinking.
Yeah.
Don't blame people. People are doing what's, they're trying to make sense of the world around them, and they're trying to do what they think is most important and most beneficial.
Well, and they're working within the system that you created.
Working within a system that we've created together.
Yeah.
Sometimes with almost no thought.
No.
And so I don't know, have you come across the idea of desire paths before, Chris?
No.
So desire.
You've seen so much today.
You've seen them, Chris. When you see. Like there's a set of paths which people are supposed to walk on, and then there's an informal path where people have trodden and and they do that because they're thinking, well, I could follow the path, but it's really inefficient and ineffective. I want to go there. So this idea of desire paths is a really interesting, in sort of town planning and architecture these days. Architects and planners sometimes sort of think about, we'll put the buildings in and then we'll watch what people do, and then we'll put the paths in after we've observed their behaviour. And I think as a metaphor, I think it's a really interesting way of thinking about building systems. So if we sort of work with what people naturally want to do and try not to prevent them doing things which they obviously want to do, then and build around that, we're gonna have less grit and less resistance.
That's wicked.
One of the things that sometimes I often hear people say in schools. They go, "Oh, the trouble with change in schools is that teachers hate change."
Right.
You've probably heard that.
Oh yeah, all the
It's
time.
absolute nonsense.
Yeah.
Right. No one hates change.
Yeah.
If you said to your staff, "I want you to do it to work less hours for more money,"
Yeah.
nobody would go, "Sorry, I hate change."
Yeah.
What people hate is loss.
Right.
This idea, you've probably heard of loss aversion.
Yeah.
And so we hate the feeling that we're missing out or losing something that we value. And so a lot of the system designs, the policies that are created with schools don't take account of what the perceived loss is that a teacher or a student indeed is going to be suffering as a result of your. So whenever there's a perceived loss, you will encounter resistance.
Yeah, love that. Well, I mean, the thing that I think is a takeaway, I think, as I said before, like an action point for leaders listening to this is to take a look at your systems. Have a look at where there's resistance, have a look at where things aren't going wrong, and track it back to the system.
Absolutely. And if anyone is interested in thinking about that, I'm currently engaged in writing a book about systems leadership in schools.
Yeah.
And I would love to include your school as a case study.
Right. Well, I'll put a link. We'll put all your social stuff in the chat afterwards. So let's finish off then with your final. I'll stop sharing a second. Let's finish off with your last Fast Friends question, which I think you alluded to being the most vulnerable, because it's about the last time that you cried in front of someone else.
The last time so I'm not a crier.
Okay.
I would sort of do this sometimes.
Sure, yeah.
But I'm not a crier. So the last time I cried was my youngest daughter made a suicide attempt.
Right.
And it was her second one. And I was away, I was working, and my wife called me and said, "You've got to come home. She's taken an overdose." And it was quite a big overdose of paracetamol. And I was just like, oh my God, that's, everything I knew at that point about paracetamol overdoses was that there's no coming back from that. It destroys your internal systems. And I thought, I'm going to say kind of goodbye to her. Drove back that night, sort of, went to the hospital, sat with her sort of throwing up, and she was on a drip, and all of this stuff. And my wife went home, and I went on duty, and just thinking like life is completely and utterly black and bleak. There's no possibility of hope anymore. And in the morning she sort of come around a bit, and we're sort of chatting about things, and I'm feeling so sad. But like holding it together. Anyway, the doctor comes round, and I don't know, he's being all chirpy,
right?
And I was just, and I said, "Look, doctor, I went out and said, I just need you to really honestly tell me what the prognosis is." And she said, "I'll be fine."
Really?
It'd be fine. Like, oh no, that's not the case. We really know how to deal with paracetamol these days. It's fine. We caught it in time. It's all pumped out of her system. That's why she's been sick all night. It's absolutely fine. There'll be no long term. And the relief.
Yeah, the relief.
I just broke down.
Oh my God.
It was such a roller coaster, Chris.
Oh,
so that's a lot. So I've burdened you with that. I'm sorry about that.
You have. I was holding back my tears on here. I would have had to say the last time I cried was when I was on the podcast with David, when he told his story about last time crying.
It was tough. It was tough. I mean, she's if for listeners who are interested, she's made a great recovery. One of the things that I learned that I didn't know about, she's now diagnosed with autism.
Right.
I thought I knew something about autism, and my ignorance about how autism presents in girls was quite shocking. And it was such a relief for her to have a sense of understanding about why she was the way she was and why she felt the way she felt. And she's now at university, and she's doing fine.
Amazing.
I know, and it's like we're so.
Again, not to switch.
I know
that idea of the relief. I mean, the relief that you felt is similar to the relief that your daughter felt. And I've been through something recently where I didn't. The relief came when I understood. We were talking about this off camera about once I understood why I was feeling that way. It gave me such a sense of relief and comfort and hope, and so that's really interesting. And we haven't talked about this, and we haven't really got time to talk. Maybe we'll do a second version, but I'm a massive fan of coaching, mentoring in schools because of the one-to-one personalized focus of it, and that safe space. What's that?
I'm a skeptic.
Are you? Yeah, I'm a skeptic about a large-scale implementation.
Yeah,
but when it's done well, that if you can create a space where people can learn to understand themselves better, bonkers levels of transformation. But anyway, let's get back to you. So,
well, I'm not sure when this will come out, but I do a podcast with Martin Robinson called "It's Your Time You're Wasting," and this week we're talking about coaching.
Oh, perfect. So, well, let's do some more links then. So people will have loved this and they'll want to connect with you. So they can connect with you on Twitter.
They can, at David Didau.
Yeah. All the books are on Amazon.
Yeah, or more ethical booksellers are available.
Yeah. I don't know what it is. What's that? I'm not sponsored by. And what's the latest book that's been published?
The most recent book is Bringing the English Curriculum to Life. It's it's a really step-by-step guide about how to have an English curriculum which is implemented well, assessed well, does all the things that you'd want it to do.
Nice.
I feel really excited about the fact. I was telling you earlier, Chris, I'm going to be working in a school that's using the curriculum that I led the design of next year. So I'm going to be teaching like actual kids the lesson, the stuff that I'm responsible for them doing, and I'm super excited.
We'll put all the links in, but you've got your new Substack.
Yeah. So just search David Didau on Substack.
Just writing really frequently at the moment.
I'm having to stop myself because the way in which Substack works, it's a bit different to what I'm used to, is that people subscribe and then when you post, they're automatically emailed
it,
and I'm really conscious that I don't want people to be like, oh my God, let's unsubscribe because I'm getting too many damn emails.
The daily email from David.
Yeah, so I'm trying to restrict myself to sort of 3 or 4 posts a week.
Nice. And there's a leadership book.
There's a leadership book that's in the process of being written. I've just finished a book on writing instruction called Couch to 5K Writing.
Okay.
Which is a step-by-step program to get children to be amazing writers. It's really evidence-based. It's got a great track record. I've co-written it with a colleague called Ricky Cole, who's been, leading it in his school, and it's had an absolutely transformational effect on the kids that have been using it. And we're super excited to get it out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks, for coming on. It's been a pleasure to reconnect, and then we'll go our separate ways for a few years.
Yeah.
Thanks to everyone for listening. And
when you've got a gap in your schedule, Chris, get in touch.
Connect with me, and if you love all the Launchpad stuff, then check out.
I should come and hang out with you at Cabot sometime. You'll have to.
That would be great. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me know.
Thanks to everyone for listening, and I'll catch you at the next one.